In other news, rescue crews in Spain have recovered the body of a 2-year-old boy who fell into a deep borehole 2 weeks ago. Julen Roselló's disappearance sparked a massive search, which involved hundreds of emergency workers and captured the hearts of Spaniards who followed this complex recovery operation at every turn. Let's speak to Simon Hunter, the editor of the English edition of the Spanish newspaper El País. Simon, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. Just remind us what happened to this boy. How did he end up falling down this hole?
Well, he was with his family on a rural property that belonged to a relative of the family, and they were preparing a paella lunch on the Sunday when the accident happened. And all of a sudden, it was one of those, it's the worst nightmare of any parent of a toddler. It's just he got away from the parents, and he just fell down this hole. This borehole had been drilled in search of water. It should have been properly covered up. It didn't even have the proper permissions and licenses to have been put in there in the first place. So the question is now, how did this hole become uncovered? Because the man who drilled it in the first place said that he left it covered up with a stone or a very large rock. But the child fell down the hole, and from that moment on, basically, the whole of Spain and internationally as well, a lot of our international readers have been following this story really closely, have just been following there was a rescue effort that lasted 13 days and that tragically turned up this morning with the discovery of the body of the child.
Yeah, nearly 2 weeks, and he fell 70 metres down this hole, Simon. Tell us about the rescue efforts, because they had a very tough time trying to get to where they thought he was.
That's right. I mean, it was an incredible feat of engineering. There's been 300 people working on the rescue effort. Initially the question was, well, how do we get to him? There was when they sent cameras down the hole, they found that there was a plug of earth above where he was thought to be. They initially tried to remove that earth from the surface, but obviously at that depth it was incredibly difficult to do and proved to be impossible. They started to tunnel a horizontal borehole to try and reach where they thought he was. They had to abandon that plan. All the time they're having to do massive work on the top of that mountain to actually get the terrain ready for the heavy plant machinery to be able to access the area. In the end, they drilled down about 1.5 meters wide a hole next to the borehole, and then the last part of the operation, which started on Thursday and finished in the early hours of this morning, was the most dangerous part. You had a specialist mining team who were using hand tools in an incredibly confined space to drill a 4-meter horizontal tunnel to where he was thought to be and where he was eventually found. They were even having to use small explosive charges on that last part of the mission because the rock that they were finding was so hard. So it was an incredibly complex operation. But really, I think after a few days, certainly after a week, I think everyone knew in their hearts that it would have to be a complete miracle to have found him alive. But at least for the poor parents who actually lost their first child at the age of 3 to sudden infant death syndrome, at least they have some closure now, and his body has actually been located.
You mentioned a bit earlier the fact that this borehole didn't have the necessary permits to be dug in the first place. Is that quite a common thing across Spain? Is that something that now will be looked into further?
It is, yeah. I mean, obviously in this area of Malaga, it's an agricultural area. I believe that they grow a lot of avocados down there. So the idea of the borehole is to search for water. And it is apparently quite a common practice for these boreholes to be dug. If they follow the regulations, they're supposed to be properly covered up with an actual manhole cover, let alone a rock. But according to the man that actually drilled the borehole in this case, he said that he left it covered up with a rock because what people do if they don't find water, they leave it covered up with a rock and come back to it sometimes, to check in the future if there's actually water in there now. But now what's going to happen, now that the body has been found, now we move to the investigation stage, because we have to find out, we have to know who's responsible. Why was that borehole left uncovered? Why was that plug of earth that he hit when he fell into it 71 meters down? And also we need to confirm whether the earth that was covering him had fallen down from the actual borehole as he traveled down it, or if there's still a theory or a possibility that it might have been thrown in there without people realizing that the child was in there. I mean, that's a rumour, but these are the things that the investigation has to clear up now.
Yeah, Simon, thank you. Very sad story with questions still to answer. Appreciate you joining us.